When application completion rates drop, something is off. Students aren't getting the support they need, and that's affecting your numbers. Enter Element 451's AI assistants. They step in where students struggle, offering real-time answers and advice, guiding them through every step. Learn how AI assistants can boost your enrollment outcomes. Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
Welcome to Breaking Silos, a podcast that shines a light on the incredible partnerships happening across campuses every day. I'm your host, Shane Baglini from Muhlenberg College. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing, enrollment management, student affairs, campus leadership, and more. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. My guest today on Breaking Silos is Josh Charles, Director of Web Strategy and Technology at Rutgers Business School, and also Vice President of the Board of Directors for HighEdWeb, who is just coming off the conference as we speak. The conference just wrapped up this week. Josh, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Josh, I want to start talking about Rutgers Business School. And you and I chatted a little bit about kind of operating from within the silo. So talk to me about some of the challenges that you encounter as a marketing leader in a school of business at a major kind of complex institution like Rutgers.
Okay. So there are a few different sort of perspectives on this. And like you mentioned, Rutgers is massive. You're talking about 70,000 students, 3 main campuses plus health sciences. So there's a lot to sort of take into consideration here. I think one unique challenge for us at Rutgers Business School is that there happens to be 2 business schools for Rutgers University. So right off the bat, you have sort of this unique challenge in digital ads and billboards and SEO and trying to not compete with each other, reaching for sometimes the same audiences, depending on the topic and major and things like that. But that's one particular challenge that is interesting for us at Rutgers. I think a second challenge that comes to mind, again, related to the size of the university, there's the prestige of Rutgers and in the Northeast and what it has done in the last 200 plus years. For the business school specifically, that means that the expectations to deliver on enrollments is rather high, right? You have all of these accolades, and every year that there's faculty and there's research and there's all of these great things that are happening, and you need to keep that momentum up. The business school is such a big player throughout Rutgers, and there are definitely a lot of great individuals, talented individuals working at other schools, and for us on campus, and for us at the business school, you need to be sort of mindful of the fact that there are things that we need to achieve, and the expectations to do those things comes with it. Connected to that particular point is like, sure, there's Rutgers and the university and trying to live up to that standard, but also we happen to be in New Jersey, which fantastic state, but it's next to Pennsylvania, which means we're next to UPenn and Wharton is a top business school to the sort of southwest. And then on the other hand, we are next to New York, which means NYU and Columbia, who are also top 10 business schools. So it's like you have this competition to compete because of the name of Rutgers in and of itself, just by itself. And then you have to compete with these other really prestigious schools who are right across the pond in one sense, and then across the border in the other. And so those are some of the things that come to mind for what we do at Rutgers Business School. The last sort of point I'll sort of add to this is that yes, there are challenges. At the same time, because of the size of the school, and now Rutgers University is 70,000 students, the business school is 10,000 of those. So that's a very sizable chunk of the university. 10,000 students means we have some luxuries in terms of resources available to us. But again, with those resources come expectations along with it. So these are just some of the things that we have to think about from a communications and marketing standpoint, given the prestige of the business school as well as the prestige of the university itself.
Yeah, all really complicated things. I love the point on the competition. Not only, but I want to follow up on the two business schools in a second. But the competition not only amongst the campus, but amongst those really prestigious peers makes it a challenge. And you're right, with increased resources, sometimes comes increased expectations. But I'm curious to hear about, and this is a good segue into our next kind of question here. Specifically, first talking about the two business schools at the university and how that relationship works and how you make sure you're not, competing against each other too much in terms of ad dollars and things. But what are some other ways that you personally and colleagues within Rutgers Business School have tried to foster some relationships around campus and break down silos?
Okay, so taking the business school complication first, I think one of the things that it's just kind of the reality for a situation like this, which, side note, there used to be two law schools for the university. And I believe in the last 5-6 years or so, working with the governor of New Jersey and lots of other folks, they merged those two schools. So now there's just one school. We as marketers, we can't be in the business of trying to hope or wish cast the schools to merge at some point in the distant future or anything like that. Our main priority has to be sort of really identifying who the audience is that we're targeting and really honing in on what is their journey like? What are they looking for? How can we help make that experience easier for them? And that's going to help create more opportunities to personalize. And that's where I think you can kind of like carve out, okay, this is the difference between our MBA program and the School of Camden's MBA program, for example. Or here's the difference between our accounting programs and the accounting program that they have. You have to kind of focus on what you can control and not get too caught up in the politics of the university and how things are going. Because I think when you do that, it's much easier to identify like, okay, this is our audience. Here's specifically what they're looking for. Here are some keywords that would help us in that process. Here are some billboards that support our brand and how we want to communicate to this audience. That's also differentiating between what the School of Camden is doing, for example. There's just a lot more, I think, that strategically that we can do in order to control the controllables. And while we do that, sure, it's helpful to get to know the staff that are working at the School of Camden. I recently had the privilege of meeting some of their staff there that are working on their marketing. I now have a little bit better understanding of the scope of their resources, the things that they're looking to do versus what we do, for example. But that takes effort. It takes effort and it takes time to want to get to know folks and understand, like, okay, we're not competitors in that sense. Like, we can all go out and hang out and meet at Rutgers events. We're trying to do what's in the best interest of our schools. Mm-hmm. So from a staff standpoint, those folks don't think like that. They don't think about the competition in the grand scheme of things, maybe the way that the deans do. So I think that focus on what we can control and really honing in on who our audience is and how we can reach those audiences, A, and then B, still take time to get to know the folks who are in similar positions to ours in that other institution so that we can have a better sense of what they do. They can have a better sense of what we do. When it makes sense, we can share resources and things like that. And that can be a healthy relationship. Connected to all of that, as far as the business schools are concerned, as far as the campus collaboration is concerned, to the second half of your question, again, for me, I like to think about genuinely being interested in what folks are doing. So that means proactively searching school websites, LinkedIn profiles, getting to know like who actually is working at the different institutions, what their titles are, what they do, and then reaching out and just having a conversation. Maybe that means having breakfast one day, which is something that I did previously before the pandemic. Maybe that means just going out for a walk one day. Maybe it's meeting at some of the Rutgers internal events that we have, but just making that initial connection first to get to know someone and let them know, hey, I found your information. Here's what I do. I wanted to get to know more about you, and not just from a work perspective, but like, what are you interested in? What do you do outside of work? Let people know that there are folks that care about them. That's one of the most powerful ways to form a connection, is to authentically show that you care about what they do, and that you're here to work together. So that's at a high level my sort of perspective. And then there are a couple of very specific things and tactics. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do was reach out to University Communications and Marketing. They help oversee communications branding for the entire university. And this is 2 years ago. I connected with a very good friend of mine named James, and he and I put together a Intro to Google Analytics 4 webinar for communicators across the university. There are about 500 in total across the entire university, so that's a very large number. And about 80 or so folks showed up live, and then we sent the recording to anyone who couldn't make it. But again, it's an opportunity to get to know folks, share knowledge. We're all working together. We may come from different schools, we may come from different parts of the campus or at an individual school or unit, but we all have a shared interest in learning. Getting to be better ourselves, working together to serve the same mission. So why not have one group that says, oh, hey, we figured out how to do something with Google Analytics 4. Share that with everyone else. Good opportunity to work together. And in addition to these Google Analytics 4 opportunities, one of the other things that I've taken the time to do is just curate podcast and conferences and any other professional development related information, volunteering, for example, as well, and share that with other folks at different schools and on the campus. Again, the biggest point here is that we have opportunities, regardless of how massive our institutions are, to get to know each other and to get to figure out like what's important to them, what's going to make their life easier, what are they interested in, and being someone who is willing to support one another in a variety of different ways. And that I have found, if you do those things, if you put in that work throughout the year, when you actually need something, it is a whole lot easier to make an ask once you have established that relationship. But you can't come up to somebody right when you need something and you don't have that relationship. It's not going to go well. So those are some of the ways that I've just continued to work on collaboration.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you said about showing people that you care on a personal level. What are you interested in? What makes you, what motivates you? And I couldn't agree more that it's those little building blocks that when you need the big thing, that foundation is built. So that's great advice. And I love that you're personally kind of reaching out, finding out about people on LinkedIn across campus, because 500 communicators is a lot. And so I'm curious to know, because I've seen this, I follow other people on LinkedIn and things like that. What does Rutgers University do to create community amongst that group of communicators? Because that's a lot. And, some schools don't have 500 people on staff. So I'm just wondering, how does that community aspect come in at the university level?
So I definitely want to give a special shout out to 3 groups. One, again, University Communications Marketing. 2, ARCOM, who oversees university-wide enrollment marketing related aspects and resources and things like that. And then there is a central IT team who also really spends time getting to share resources and alerts and things like that with the entire IT community. And that community is 800 plus folks. So you have these 2 massive groups, and there are leaders within all 3 of these groups who make it a point to share resources, get together. The ARCOM folks and University Communications and Marketing work together to put on these communicators events throughout the year where we all get together in person and share, here's what the teams have been working on recently. Here's what's on the roadmap for the future. Here are our opportunities where we can work together, and here's how to do that specifically. And yeah, that takes time. It takes coordinating, but these central teams have put in the work. They've really thought about how can we leverage the power of the folks who are at the individual schools to support the overall marketing and communication efforts, and how can they be resources to the folks in the individual units. So definitely want to give a special shout out to them. And I think one thing that's important to note there, for that may be the campus groups, but even as individuals in the schools like ours, there's freedom and flexibility to do what we think is best to support our individual school. Yes, there's policies, there's guides and things like that. For example, for here's what all websites should have in common. There's work that's being done in that area to help the individual schools, but we also have the flexibility to be creative and to be experimental. One of the things that we do at the business school that I think was an early pioneer in a lot of respects, I believe we were the first school to start using Drupal way back in 2011, well before any other part of the university used Drupal. And we started using cloud hosting for websites, I believe one of the first, or if not the first school that did that back in 2014. And now it's become part of the standard for across all of the universities. So it just goes to show that, yeah, there's going to be centralized efforts, and those teams do a fantastic job of bringing everyone together. But if there is a school or a unit who is doing something that is maybe more advanced or more experimental that could be helpful for the entire group, then they have the flexibility to do that. And then we work together on ways of incorporating what's working, what's not working back into the fold so that everyone can benefit from it. But it takes folks who are actively thinking about, like, how can I not just make myself better and the unit that I'm directly responsible for, but what can I do that's going to be a net positive for all of these different folks? And it starts with the folks in RCOM and the folks in UCM and elsewhere, as well as leaders in individual schools that have that mentality to want to work together in an institution or a university that's as big as ours. So it's a collaborative effort, but there are definitely some key players in there that are supporting how we can build that community of marketers, like you mentioned, and other groups as well, across this very, very large system.
Very large. 800 people in IT is quite the operation. I mean, I would imagine that it takes a village to do to create that kind of community. So it's great to hear some of those examples. And you mentioned 10,000 students in Rutgers Business School, which makes that quite the operation as well. So talk about how your individual division at Rutgers and maybe even you and your team are breaking down silos and working across departments within the business school.
I kind of think about this in two ways. First, like you mentioned, there's things that we do within our own team. And then second, there are things that we do across departments in the school. So with respect to our own team, I tend to think that within our own team, the first thing that has to happen is that a team needs to feel comfortable talking openly about what it is that we do and how we want to work together. I think too often when I see folks putting out job descriptions for needs to be collaborative and all of these other things, I don't truly feel like folks understand how to make that happen. And it's not just going to be like, well, you have these folks that all work together. Why aren't they collaborating? Or they should just figure it out. You have to really take time to understand, as an individual, understand what's your preferences. How do you like to do things? How do you like to work? How do you like to communicate with folks? And talk openly about that process. To give a very specific example, one of the things that I've had the opportunity to organize and lead this year for our team is getting together specifically for the purpose of talking about what is it that each person does in the course of marketing a graduate program. So taking a real example so that we can not be too theoretical and talk about what does our web developer do with respect to marketing the MBA program? How do they do that? What's involved in the process? Who do they need to work with in order to accomplish their goals and their role for that activity? And then you go around the room and have each person talk about their experiences in that way. And there's lots of different ways to kind of do this, but in our case, we put together a document, and that in that document it says, using this example, marketing the MBA program, here are all of these major categories of work: advertising, web development, content strategy, social media, and things like that. And we listed all of the tasks that each individual came up with that supports that main goal. And then gave the opportunity, and this part's still ongoing, but encouraging two, maybe groups of three, to talk together over the next couple of months about their work, how they like to work together, what's their preferences, what could work better. For example, if somebody is writing a news article that is going to be used in an email campaign, then the person who's managing the email campaign and the person that's writing the article, that's an opportunity to talk about what are some of the things that the audience is looking for. What are they reacting to when they're engaging with that email, so that the person writing that article can kind of take that into consideration when they're writing future articles, for example.
Hey, it's Shane, and I'm excited to tell you that Element 451 is hosting the AI Engage Summit on October 29th and 30th. This free virtual event features many of your favorite Enrollify creators and will explore AI's impact on student engagement, enrollment marketing, and institutional success. Learn to tap into AI to automate personalized outreach, improve your emails, streamline content creation, and boost campaign performance. Plus, hear directly from current students on how AI is influencing their engagement and campus life. The AI Engage Summit is your guide to understanding and applying AI at your school. Registration is free, so visit element451.com to save your spot. Now, back to the show.
But again, the point is, you have to talk about these things. It's not just going to happen. And so I had the privilege of just helping the team think about processes and preferences and style, and all of that stuff has surfaced this documentation that we put together that sort of collects our experiences so that we can say, okay, when we talk about marketing a program, it typically looks like this. Here are all of the tasks. Here's who's responsible for those things. Here's what they need in order to support their task. And that can be a loose representation of how we collaborate. Of course, you still got to continue to update that information, and you still have to continue to work together and continue to refine that process. But it starts by having those open conversations. And that might mean, instead of having a 90-minute team meeting going over all of these random projects in the team, we have a 90-minute meeting where we're just talking to each other about things that we think are working well and things that aren't working well. We're making time to be more reflective of process, because if we can get process down, that's going to make those projects work a whole lot easier. And so that's 1 month-long project and exercise that I've been working on. And just for clarity, our team has 10 people altogether. So between a communications group, a advertising group, if you will, and then a web services group that connects the two of them, just bringing all those folks together to talk about things, again, using a very specific example so that folks can have something tangible to latch on to understand what's working and what's not working. And it's really been helpful. I think it's surfaced things that were assumed, and now we've had more explicit conversations about things. It's helped identify maybe behaviors and review processes that don't need to be there. So again, those things are maybe going to come out the wrong way in the middle of a project. But when you sort of put the project aside and you're just having casual conversation, I think that also makes it a lot easier for folks to feel safe having more of okay, it's not about where I am right now. It's just, we had this experience. I wonder if we can do this thing differently going forward. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that goes into it, but that has been really helpful from a team perspective.
Yeah, that's great. I love the intentionality behind that.
That's the team. The other half is those other departments within the school. Now, we talked earlier about collaborating across the campus or across the or outside of our own school. Within our school, there's so many different ways to experiment and try to work across the aisle, so to say, with other groups. one of the things that, in addition to our own team that I've been talking about with the team and trying to experiment with, is let's not just sort of haphazardly choose different folks to have meetings with. I mean, we all have too many meetings, but let's be more strategic about this. So, for example, if our main priority is enrollments and branding, brand communication, things like that, then at least with respect to enrollment, let's think strategically about what is it that we need to do. We need to market our graduate programs and ultimately help recruit students into those programs. Who does that involve? That involves admissions. That's likely going to involve the IT department because they oversee the application portal. That will also involve the program directors and or staff. So we've been having conversations very recently, and this is still a work in progress, but the goal is to let's bring key folks together across these different departments. And that right now looks like communications, marketing, admissions, IT, and certain program staff. And we're going to have meetings, maybe that's every 2 months or every 3 months, where it's a 90-minute meeting or something like that. And we get together, we talk about where are we with the numbers? Because first of all, that's what we're going to have to talk about with the dean's office. So first of all, where are we with the numbers? Here's what each group has been working on towards particular aspects of the enrollment funnel. And what are some of the challenges that we're currently facing? What's coming up that we need to start preparing for? And then give each of the different groups within that overall bucket the opportunity to work towards any subtask throughout in between the times that we have to meet. And this could take many different shapes, but the purpose is to think strategically about how do we bring the right folks together in the room so that we can have conversations about the enrollment funnel. So it's not about, I want to have a meeting with graduate admissions. It's, I want to have a meeting about enrollment marketing because that's a strategic priority for the dean's office. So flipping that around and not making it about who we're meeting with per se, but why we're meeting and how that why is connected to a larger goal for the school. That's the way that we're kind of approaching things now. And that helps get around who should be or who shouldn't be in meetings and things like that. Again, trying to get away from that sort of politics. One of the other things that has been helpful is I think trying to be more strategic about the program director specifically. So those folks are very smart and very good at teaching and running their individual programs. Where we see value is in tell us, what are you hearing from your students? What are they asking questions about when they attend admissions events, when they become current students, when they become alumni? Help us better understand their interest in what they're doing so that we can incorporate that information back into the student journey, the enrollment funnel, and trying to figure out what's the best method of facilitating that information sharing. Is it a meeting once a year, maybe once a semester, maybe some other way of exchanging emails and things like that? I think that part is still very much a work in progress, but the intent is to say, we want to understand their perspectives, and also we want them to know specifically how we are helping their program. Because what you don't want to have happen is the program directors are going to have program director meetings anyway. They're going to have meetings with the dean's office anyway. You don't want them telling your dean's office, hey, I don't know what communications and marketing is doing and my numbers are down. Like, you don't want that to happen. So you want to be able to be strategic about including them in conversations to leverage their knowledge, sure, but also to plant seeds and to help educate them on what it's actually like within the enrollment marketing process. And that is a collaborative effort that I think is helpful for them. I also think it's helpful for us because we have to constantly tell our story about what we do, what's the expertise required in that process, and why, so that eventually, like we talked about before, when we need to ask for something, and that's a $200,000 new CRM or some huge website redesign project, you can have all of these different people on the same page about, yes, what they're asking for is what we need, and it's going to roughly cost us amount of money. So all of these collaborative efforts when it comes to working with other folks in the school serve those purposes, getting to know folks, helping them help us do marketing better, helping them talk to the dean's office, and helping us be able to have those more expensive conversations when those things need to happen.
I like that. More expensive conversations. Yeah, no, I mean, it's great advice, especially I really like the part about the graduate, the program coordinators, and sort of telling your story to them to make sure there's no whisper down the alley effect that happens, because we all know all marketers have been there. So that's great advice. And Josh, as we close out, speaking of advice, I'm wondering if you were talking to somebody considering a role, a non-centralized role at a school like Rutgers or a smaller school, in a business school or medical school, what advice would you have for them in terms of what to think about when considering a position like that, and how to really hit the ground running as far as building bridges and enhancing collaboration?
Sure. And I want to start by saying that whether someone is in a centralized or non-centralized or school level or campus level, all of those roles can be valuable. I think what an individual probably needs to think about is like, what are they interested in career-wise, and where do they want to go? And maybe that might influence the types of roles that they're thinking about. But regardless, if they are thinking about those non-centralized roles, there's two things. First, kind of piggybacking off of what we talked about earlier, it's being genuine and wanting to get to know people and knowing what they do. Whether, even if I'm working at the business school, for example, and I'm talking to somebody who works at arts and sciences or engineering, it doesn't matter, because it's not about me. It should be about them. It should be about what is it that they're interested in doing. How do they do that? And how can I learn more about them? And then I think that would start to help somebody who's maybe a team of one, or in a very small situation, or working in a non-centralized capacity. That would help to not feel isolated in that way, I guess. So just really getting to know folks, and periodically checking in with them throughout the year. It shouldn't be like a one and done thing. You should be able to have conversations, get to know folks, and carry those relationships forward. The second thing, which is very related to the first. Okay, so I have one of my favorite video game franchises is Horizon, and that is a title for the PlayStation console. And in it, there is a character who, at one point or another, says something to the effect of, it's time to expand our frame of inquiry. And I like to expand on that by assuming that it means that we have to sometimes think differently or think outside of the situation that we're in. And in addition to the relationships that we build with folks at maybe other schools or within our own school, we also have to take time to connect with folks outside of our university. So even if it's just something as simple as reaching out and meeting people at conferences who work in very similar environments at universities across the country. Higher ed is a lot of things. We are never lonely. There are folks who are doing the same work that we're doing at multiple institutions. And we just have to seek out and find those individuals and talk to them and get to know what their experience is like, because that's going to help us in our own institutions not feel like we're isolated or alone or anything like that. And it also just gives us another perspective. It's someone who's doing the same work in the same situation that has maybe different experiences that you can learn from. So I always say that in addition to getting to know folks at Rutgers or whatever that institution happens to be that somebody works at, get to know folks who are working at all sorts of other institutions. Get outside your comfort zone, go to conferences, listen to podcasts, read blog posts. There's a lot of folks in the higher ed space who write as well. And also, again, there's lots of higher ed related organizations like HighEdWeb and others where there's a whole volunteer community and other aspects where you can get to learn from other folks who are in very similar situations. So definitely take advantage of that for anyone who's in a situation where they're in a non-centralized role. Take advantage of the opportunities to connect with folks, whether that's via LinkedIn or the less said about Twitter, the better, but whatever social media platform happens to be, or at events, get to know folks who are working in similar institutions or similar circumstances to learn from them. In addition to the ongoing work that I think is beneficial to get to reach out to folks across our own institutions. And that would help, I think, lessen the feeling of being isolated if they happen to be in a very, very small team or under-resourced or in a non-centralized role or anything like that. Break out of those confines by doing those things.
Yeah, that's great. I spot on. I mean, I think higher ed is one of the most friendly, helpful communities I've ever found. And so your point is well made about expanding your horizons beyond just your institution. And yeah, listening to podcasts like this, hopefully. But as we close out here, Josh, thanks so much for joining me. I'm a big fan of yours. I would encourage folks listening to look up Josh on LinkedIn. His LinkedIn profile will be in the show notes. And if you like this episode, rate, subscribe, review, do all of those good things, because it helps us promote the episode and Josh's work. But thanks so much, Josh. We'll talk to you soon. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your hosts. Learn from Dave Builds, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and many more of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.